Welcome to this week's Webinar Wednesday. I'm Catherine Irwin, Speaker Coordinator here at the MRC. Today's webinar is Fighting Refund Fraud with Biometric Security, presented by MRC members Nuance. Before we dive into today's session, I'd like to provide a brief overview of the Merchant Risk Council and the services we provide. The MRC is a nonprofit trade association for e-commerce fraud prevention and payment professionals. We were established more than 20 years ago by a group of merchants interested in developing merchant-focused resources. Currently, we support over 600 member companies, including merchants, solution providers, law enforcement groups, and advisory service organizations across 30 countries. And we're still growing. In addition to webinars like this one, you can attend MRC events both online and in person, explore our massive content library in our resource center, and sign up for the MRC newsletter, Commerce Corner, to stay ahead of all the latest industry news and trends. MRC members also have access to member-exclusive content, discussion forums, educational programs, discounted rates for conferences and events, and plenty more. To learn more about who we are or how you can benefit by joining, visit the MRC website at merchantriskcouncil.org. Okay, back to today's session. Please make sure to use the Q&A panel to ask any questions you might have, and at the end of the webinar, we'll do our best to answer them. Now I'd like to pass it over to our speaker for today's session, Danny Ross, Senior Fraud and Biometric Specialist at Nuance Communications. Danny?
Thanks, Catherine. And to give everyone a few more minutes to join, let me share one of my favorite personal retail stories. To set the stage properly, I just need to explain. My wife is what I call a professional shopper. She knows every store hour, every policy, and she definitely works to maximize her dollars. I'll give you an example. So we bought a pair of blue chairs for the sitting room, and it looked great in my opinion. But after a while, my wife decided she preferred gray. So she said, let's go ahead and take them back and exchange them. At this point, me being the husband that I am, I pointed out to her that first, I no longer had the box, and I probably couldn't even find a receipt. I said, I don't think there's any way that we can return it. Long story short, next thing you know, I'm loading up the truck with a pair of blue chairs, and we're heading back to the store. So we get to the counter, and the customer service rep, a young man there, very politely explained to my wife exactly what I just said, that she couldn't return those blue chairs without a box or a receipt. And that's when I kind of stepped back, faded into the background, and gave the young man kind of a sad smile, as he didn't understand exactly how the next few minutes were going to go. But I think you get the idea. So as I get into the presentation here, all of these stories are relevant because they are effectively part of your daily life, right? How do you tell a legitimate customer like my wife, who is a good customer? She buys lots from this particular store, but she was kind of pushing the boundaries of the store policies. And what she was basically looking for is a kind of an extension of the time period where you normally could return that particular product. So see, in this particular case, you need, and all retailers need, tools to be able to trust if this is happening, perhaps not in person, but online. That person that's in front of you asking you to kind of bend your policies, is exactly who she says she is, right? She is a legitimate person, a legitimate customer, no bad intentions. She just wants you to kind of extend a little courtesy. So once you know you can trust her, you can look in the back in the CRM system, see she just spent $10,000 in furniture. Okay, so let's go ahead and make that exchange. And then we're on the way out the door with 2 gray chairs instead of blue. So that's one example, but not everyone is as honest as my wife. So for example, the next type of person I want to talk a little about is what we call an abuser here in the green. This is someone who is going beyond your policies multiple times. So how do you identify that particular person? How do you know, okay, this is the 6th time they've asked for a refund within, 45 days, or within, whatever the policy states is not acceptable. I know, for instance, a large luxury purse manufacturer, and they have very strict policies how often you can return those purses because they cost a lot, and that's just part of their policy. So what happens there is their customers know this, so they'll change their email address, and so the next time they go to return something, they have a totally different account. It's very difficult for that particular retailer to actually know that, okay, now this person has gone beyond just simple pushing of boundaries and is in full-blown abuse. They're not quite professional fraudsters, but there may be a point where, as we say in the retail business, that you may want to fire that particular customer. So then after you do fire them, you need a way to be able to track that they're not just coming back under a new email address or a new phone number. So those are the types of things that are challenges for every retailer that is out there. Now let's talk a little bit about the professionals. So these are the teams out there. They're working 9 to 5. They have call centers just like your contact center, and they know your policies probably even better sometimes than your agents. Their job in life is to go beyond what we would call abuse and actually make profits from your leniency in your policies, because again, you set those up to make your VIP customers happy. So you need professional tools that will scale, so you can deal with the thousands of sessions and interactions you have either in chat or in the voice channel on a daily basis, and be able to find those particular fraudsters. So we're going to talk today about voice biometrics and some of the other technologies that are on the platform that can do just that. But before we go on, let's talk a little bit about the scale. I was on a phone call this morning, and I was talking to a customer, a retailer, and we were talking about the impact of fraud since COVID. So obviously, most retailers before COVID had a very booming in-store business, but e-commerce was kind of a secondary item. Now, of course, that has flipped, and e-commerce is very key to everyone's business. And so if you take a look at the overall size of this problem, this particular retailer was a perfect example. He has a very, very good handle on shrinkage in store. As a matter of fact, he's very proud of that number, and they've been very, very effective in bringing it down. But if you take a look at the same thing in e-commerce, and the way that he found out that he had a real big problem is they did an actual survey and research, and they looked at all of the numbers, and he found he was averaging about 4% now. So in comparison to in-store shrinkage, which was basically negligible, his online business was definitely at an unsustainable level. So these are the global averages that you see here. And as I step through this, you can see that it's just getting as a bigger and bigger problem year over year. And as you see the numbers here, you're looking at astronomical numbers. So as we go ahead and kind of look at the problem from tactical to strategic here, we're looking at all of the different ways that we need to get a handle on this. So let's talk about some of the specifics of how we can get that done. And let's talk about some of the larger challenges that retailers have been sharing with me. So at a recent show in New York, or a large retail show in New York, we continued to speak to our retailers, and we got a very good idea of some of their biggest issues. So the manufacturer I talked about earlier today, number one issue was stopping return fraud. And I hear stories how creative the hackers are, all the different ways that the bad guys are actually performing this type of fraud on a daily basis. So once we know how big the problem is, and there's tools out there where you can actually go to like a donotpay.com or download from the dark web Bob's ebook, and there's tips in there about specifically how to return things without a receipt, which may not be that serious, but then there's actual, on the dark web, there's forums that you can go up and actually sign up for services where it's almost fraud as a service, where they'll say, hey, just send me your receipt and your account information, and we'll actually go out and try to get a refund for you, and we'll share those profits with you. So this is a big business for fraudsters, as you saw on the previous slide. And so there's many different interactions. So how do you know that that box that you just got that maybe have a brick in it. So there's, inbound and outbound types of fraud, right? So they may be returning items that are damaged where they've pulled out the most important components in that device. How do you know that? So these are all the types of return fraud that's extremely prevalent in our day and age. Another interesting, or not so much interesting, but another prevalent type of fraud that retailers are telling us about is their invasion of their loyalty program. So there's a couple of different types of fraud here as well. So there is the actual, account takeover. So they're on the dark web. All of our information is up there. They get that information. They find an account. They actually take over the account. Perhaps they even use the credit card on file. But most importantly, they'll take those reward points and they'll actually go into the store and purchase things in the store. Interestingly enough, as we talk about these use cases, these are all real world use cases. I was on with a team member discussing this particular retailer, and she says, I just got an email from that retailer where, I guess they used my credit card and they went in the store and I got no notification of it. And the reason for that is, of course, they went into the store. So that kind of circumvents a lot of the e-commerce types of risk mitigation tools that retailers have. So they know the strategies that'll get around your systems. Another example is I have a retailer where they do most of their handling of customer complaints through chat. So that particular customer is actually a restaurateur, a QSR, and they have a problem where the fraudsters are essentially talking to the chatbot, getting a coupon, and then taking that coupon and selling it on the dark web. So obviously, if they're working at this 9 to 5, those numbers can add up pretty significantly, and it's low cost. It's very easy for them to do. They can do the same thing in the voice channel, just kind of socially engineer the agent, and then they're making money from very little effort. And so those are some of the loyalty and abuse challenges that I've seen. And then the third and final one is retailers are looking for a better way to handle frontline workers. And so there's a couple of things here. So most of your frontline workers might be sharing devices. So these could be the little inventory devices that they have. They could be desktops. They could be iPhones, iPads, and they're logging in. I have some managers that, they tell me they log in 10 times a day to get to different back-end applications. It could be your workers on a storeroom floor. So someone walks up to them and asks them, do they have this particular inventory item in stock? And they need to log in quickly to look that up. So, I've had lots of different studies around this, but sometimes it can take up to a minute to get past the VPN and the firewall and all the different, protections that you have set up. So meantime, of course, your customer is standing there waiting for you to do all of this, and it's not a very good experience for either your employee or your customer. And then if you take that and start looking at loss of productivity, let's say the average worker logs in 3 times a day. It takes them a minute each time they do it. You have 400,000 employees. Obviously, that lost productivity time just logging in can add up very quickly. So there's 3 very simple, very quick, but very, very important examples of how retailers are dealing. And the key thing is you could stop these individual things if they were happening, once or twice a day, but at scale, that's really what the biggest challenge is. How do you stop them from all of the different places? So I'm going to demonstrate how easy it is to authenticate a caller using just their voice. First, I'm going to be a legitimate caller with a question, and then I'll show what it looks like as the platform detects a suspected fraudster in real time. Let's imagine I'm a customer service agent waiting for a call. You will not hear the agent, just my voice as I authenticate. Let's go ahead and place the call. Hi, yes, I'm calling to get a refund. I'm not happy with my current selection. I'd like to change it. As you can see, the system matches my phone number, looks up my account, and then compares my voice to my voice print on file. The agent gets a green screen confirming my identity. Now, let me attempt to break into another account. Hi, yes, my name is Todd Hinesley. My phone number is 305-305-9999. 389-7370. My date of birth? Sure, it's 7/11/87. Even if I have all of the valid information for Todd, the platform can see that my voice does not match Todd's voice print. So it looks to see if this voice matches any on the known abuse or fraudster watch list. This is very powerful as the caller can pretend to be anyone, but once you have their voice on the watch list, both you and your customers are protected from any future fraud attempts. All right. Sorry for that. It was a little, I'm using this platform for the first time, so a little bit of a technical glitch there. But what's great about that demo is it showcases very quickly, if you're a legitimate customer calling into a contact center, you can very easily and quickly authenticate yourself in just a few seconds. But in that same platform, we can, for retailers, easily detect and stop any fraudster that is trying to break into any other account. So I'm going to pause here to see if we have any questions. Catherine?
All right, Danny, it looks like we have a couple. The first one is, what happens if I have a cold?
Oh, sure. That's an easy one. So voice itself, when we started looking at this technology about 20 years ago, we were very famous for a product called Dragon, where we would change speech into text. But we also have the same technology to go the other way. So as we analyzed the voice, we realized each individual's voice is as unique as a fingerprint. Literally, we have thousands of characteristics in our voice, some which are physical, which is how your body is made up, which basically allows us to identify you individually from a separate person, even if you're sick. So we have thresholds between our software where, if that day your voice is just a little bit different, it would still meet that threshold. And we're looking at other characteristics, including your accent, your language, how quickly you speak. So there's thousands of characteristics that go into a voice analysis. So the sound of your voice that day is just one of them. So we can very easily still authenticate you. And ultimately, if there's such a difference in the voice, we can actually go ahead and fall back to standard authentication methods if necessary. Any other questions?
That is really fascinating. Okay, the next one, what happens as I get older or if I have surgery?
Oh, okay. So every time a caller reaches our system, we actually take a look at the audio that we're getting that particular day. And if that is any way different or better, we'll actually enhance the voice print that we have on file for you. So as you change, your voice print will change that's on file, so you won't have any problems being authenticated. Now, if you do have something completely drastic, as I mentioned earlier, the other thing that we can do is simply re-enroll you. So the agent would say something like, we're having a little trouble authenticating you, Mr. Ross. Maybe, and they would say something like, oh, yeah, I just had, vocal cord surgery of some kind, so my voice is different. And all the agent would have to do is click one button and then re-enroll that particular caller. And so we now have a new voice print based on the changed voice. So very easy to handle. Any other questions?
At this point, no. Thanks, Danny.
All right, so definitely want to encourage everyone. I like to make these sessions as interactive as possible, so please go into the Q&A and ask your questions. I really do appreciate your input into the conversation. So let's take a little bit of slower look at, or a closer look at what we just did. So I called in, identified myself to the system, and again, this can occur both at the contact center level or at the IVR level, and state my intent. And generally speaking, just that little bit of audio is enough for the system to begin to compare my voice to this, the audio that's coming out of the device, and essentially make a decision. So it runs it through our processes, our AI risk engine, looking at all of those thousands of characteristics that I mentioned earlier, comparing it. Perhaps there's device or geolocation information. All of this is kind of put together into decision that's sent back to the agent. So again, they'd get a green screen or a purple screen if there's something suspicious during the flow of the call. But there's also some additional techniques that we can apply for higher risk items. So for example, if during that particular session, there was a request to return, an item and get a refund, and it was over a particular threshold, say $1,000 or something like that. There's other post-call processes that the fraud team can do, and close enough to real time where it can seriously impact the ability for fraudsters to perform fraud. So I'm going to take a look at some of those tools, and keep in mind this is happening either in real time with the watch list or immediately after the call, and hopefully before you either ship out that exchange item or you issue that refund. So what we'll do is we'll integrate ourselves into your business flow and apply different techniques depending on where we are. So one of those techniques that we just I was speaking about is what we call clustering. And so just to keep this very, very simple, clustering just means that we're going to take a look at all of the voices that come through your system on an hourly basis, weekly basis, monthly basis, whatever you'd like. And we'll look for that same voice calling in multiple times. So it's a pattern recognition, but it's unique to our technology. It's based on just your voice. So there can be other metadata involved, but that would be part of the beauty of this is you could do it just on the voice. That's what makes us unique. So in this case here, we see the green caller was twice, the purple caller was 5 times. So let's say this is within 1 hour. Obviously, there might be something suspicious about someone calling in 5 times within an hour. So the team that's responsible for this could simply go into the back end. It's all a web-based administrative console where the fraud team would live and work. And they would just go in there and they would actually listen to each session. And so very quickly they could see that there's something odd going on here. And perhaps they would stop that item from shipping or from that refund from being issued. And they would send a link to the person in an email and say, we need to get a little bit more information, that type of thing. So it's very easy for you to react in real time if you get a purple screen, or directly after that call, maybe an hour later or a day later, depending on your policies. And when you find out that that particular individual is doing something suspicious, let's say they're an abuser. So we can create not only a fraudster watch list, we can also create abuser watch list. So you may have different policies of how you deal with those issues depending on what watch list that particular person is on. So now, of course, if you get these 5 voice calls from Purple and you see that they're definitely trying to either break into someone else's account each time they call, or they're doing that legwork before they get away with a cash out event, you can then make a change to that flag that particular account. You can add that voice to the watch list. So of course, when they call the 6th time that day, because again, if they are getting away with fraud, they will call again because, again, it's a job to them. So they will call back again and try again and again. Same thing with the abusers, right? They'll try to change their email address, they'll do whatever, and they'll reach back out again. So let's go ahead and take one more example of how our technology works post-call as well. This is called backwards search. So let's say you've got that voice that you've caught through just repetition of them calling in, and now you've put them on the watch list. The next thing you want to do, of course, is see how big the problem is. So with backward search, you can actually take a voice, go back in time, 2 days, 7 days, 20 days, whatever, looking for that same voice. So now your team has an actual idea of how big the problem is with that particular individual. In some countries, retailers do actually go out and prosecute based on this because voice is admissible in court. Most of the retailers in the US don't, but I've seen around the world, there's just different policies around how they deal and how seriously they deal with fraudsters and theft. So this could be just part of your shrinkage. But the great news for you as a retailer is now that you have that voice, you basically shut them down from your organization. Doesn't matter. They can hand that script off to the next person. but they themselves cannot ever call you again and get through your system. So that's what's very effective about this. Once you get them, they're dead to your organization. So I talked about two things really quickly there, right? Which is one, how do you add how do you locate new voices that are, you've never heard before just by pattern recognition using clustering, and then how you can use backward search to go back in time and actually find all of the sessions or the attacks that have occurred by that particular one voice. Another important concept around voice I wanted to make is that for a retailer, it's sort of an enroll once, use many. So you can effectively enroll or onboard a customer, perhaps in your mobile app. And I've seen where a customer will onboard, they do all of the normal things that they do. There's another little link or a checkbox that says, sure, I like to use my voice to protect my account. Perhaps they have one of our many banks that use voice biometrics, and so they're completely familiar with it. As a matter of fact, speaking of banking, we have a banking customer that does use our solution in all of these channels. So if you go up to their website, you can click a link, enroll yourself in the voice ID program, and protect your account. You can do it while you call at the top of the IVR, the self-service IVR. You can do it at the top of the contact center as soon as you get done. So normally for enrollment, the process kind of goes like this. The agent will help you, satisfy you, make sure you're happy, and then they'll say something like, Mr. Ross, I see you're not enrolled in our voice biometrics voice ID system. Is it okay if I enroll you? Get permission, and that's it. And they click a button, the person is enrolled, the caller never sees any difference, but the next time they call, they're immediately authenticated within just a few seconds. So completely different experience for your legitimate callers. And the same thing is if we find a voice, we put them on the watch list, and it doesn't matter where that transaction is taking place, we can shut down those fraud teams. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some other use cases. But right now, what I wanted to do is I'm going to pause again, and I'm going to give one more demo. This demo is around the retail employee experience. So this is an example of an employee who is authenticating using a mobile device. Again, it could be any device with a microphone, Zebra, iPhone, iPad, anything that they're using. And it allows them to authenticate in just a few seconds. So let's kind of walk through what that looks like. So first I'm going to go ahead and authenticate myself. My name is Danny, and my voice is my password. That's it. I'm authenticated, and I'm into my back end. I can go use any of the many applications that I have. So let's go ahead and go into the origination process. Let's talk a little bit about what it looks like when I enroll a new or onboard a new employee. So I'm filling out all of my paperwork online. If you're like my teenage grandson, you're on your phone doing everything. And there's a point where it asks you, do you want to enroll in voice biometrics to protect your account? You can read through and scroll through all of the content. You click the box, and it begins the biometric enrollment. The last two numbers of my ID are 69. So this is very similar to adding biometrics to any phone or any device. It's a three-step process. My full name is Danny Ross. So again, we're just collecting some audio samples. We're collecting some information about you. And the last one is my voice is my password. And that's it. I'm now enrolled, and so my account, let's say I have high access to servers. It's well protected now with voice. Let's go ahead and authenticate. My name is Danny, and my voice is my password. That's it. So as you can see, we're taking the speech, converting it to text. We're also looking at the device metadata. We're looking at where you are geographically, all right? So we're using all of those tools to kind of deal with the employee. So again, we can have a shared device. When I log off, you can hand it to the next person, and they're going on from there with that same exact voice, same exact device, which is normally not allowed by an operating system, having multiple people being able to authenticate with your back-end systems. Usually it's restricted to an individual. So that kind of gets around that problem for retailers, and it provides a highly secure methodology. We have more than 500 deployments around the world. So if you have a bank in the United States, any of the top 8 out of the top 10 banks in the US alone utilize our solutions. We have banks like HSBC, where they actually publish how much money they save every year using our solution for voice biometrics. And the idea behind what I'm getting here is, for retailers, this means you have a very secure tool to add to your current security stack. So the way that I mentioned earlier, there's tools out there that are fraud as a service. Think of biometrics as security as a service. You can apply it across any channel. There's nothing to forget. All of your employees, customers can easily authenticate themselves wherever they are, whatever device they're using. So I'm going to stop right here and see if there are any new questions that have come in.
Let's see, we have a couple. The first one is, what IVR system are you integrated to? Do we need to use an IVR created by Nuance to use the biometric feature?
Okay, so first of all, we are essentially telephony and CCAS, or contact center agnostic. You can use any type of either, again, IVR solution. Hopefully you would use a Nuance IVR, of course, but we will work with any IVR system, and the same thing with your back-end systems. We have connectors to a lot of the contact center applications that are out there. Again, we've been doing this particular part of our business for more than 20 years, and we've also been in the actual contact center space for many, many years as well. So we're very well versed with integrating into pretty much any back-end system that you may have. Did I miss the second part of the question? I think I got the first part. What was the second part?
Do we need to use an IRV created by Nuance to use the biometric feature?
Oh, yeah, so I did answer that question. Yeah. No, you do not.
Okay, it looks like we have one more. You mentioned I can replace SMS or text messages with voice biometrics. How would I go about doing that?
Oh, sure. That's a good question as well. So a lot of us still rely on one-time passwords, OTP being sent out to a device. And the biggest challenge with that is, even when you do that, you have no idea who's actually responding to that SMS message. So if I'm a fraudster and maybe I've cloned your phones through SIM swaps, or I have basic, if you send me an email, I have access to your email account, or any of those types of things that are part of account takeover. The professional fraudster can usually get around those types of things. And there's tons of different ways they can do it. So the main thing is, you really have no idea who's on the other end of it. So the way that you would do it is just make it part of your workflow, your business flow. So if you're in an app and they click the link, obviously it has a microphone, so they can say something like, at such and such retailer, my voice is my password. And so just that simply, you've identified that particular person. Maybe they're trying to change the shipping address, or they're trying to change the credit card information, anything that they're trying to do, or get access to the credit card information. You want to be able to shut that down. So that's the protection aspect of it. The similar type of way that we can use it is, if you're in the middle of a transaction that's high risk, that gets flagged for, maybe even your legacy tool is flagging it, or we flag it, you can essentially just, again, have them click a link, and we can push a link to them, that's fine as well, where they click that link and they simply speak a phrase. So it's very, very easy to replace essentially the same thing that you're doing now with SMS, just replacing it with voice technology. And then the third way that you can do it I have, for example, retailers that are very big e-commerce retailers, but if the return is over a certain dollar amount, they only handle it in their voice channel with their contact center agents. And then, as I've demonstrated before, as soon as that fraudster gets to the voice channel, we'll immediately flag them, or an abuser will immediately flag them and shut them down. So the idea is you can use it in any of the channels. So you can go from digital to voice if you need to, or you can keep it completely in the digital channel and handle it. So you can do it via chat. Same thing, they just click a link in the chat. So if you're doing a live chat with an agent, the agent can say, hey, Mr. Ross, you're doing something here where we need to verify who you are. Is it okay if I send you a link? And they basically push a link out to the person in the chat session, and they click that link, and it just gives them a prompt to speak. Very simple, very easy to do. Any other questions?
We have another one. Can nuance pierce through voiceovers?
I'm sorry, say it again?
Can nuance pierce through voiceovers?
Is it the question around synthetic voices or fake voices? I just want to make sure I understood. So I'm having a little trouble hearing you.
I'm not 100% sure, but my guess is
Read it one more time. I'm sorry. Read it one more time.
Can nuance pierce through voiceovers?
Okay, so that's what I thought. So when they say voiceovers, they're, in this case, I believe, asking if someone either uses playback, which means they record a voice and they play it back into the system. Can we detect that? Absolutely, number one. So yes, we can find that, because again, I mentioned those characteristics in your voice. There's artifacts left behind when you play something back that the human ear can't hear, but our systems can pretty easily detect. Again, think about it this way. We kind of invented the technology, so we have a lot of ways to tell if that is a playback. Another kind of voiceover, using that word, is what we call a synthetic voice, where they're actually typing it in to one of the AI chatbots that are out there, and it's creating a voice, maybe using a sample of your voice and making it very close. And again, same thing, because of the way those technologies work, we basically can detect it. So the answer is yes, and yes, no matter what kind of synthetic voice it is, we can pretty easily find it. And before, this year, I would have said, we really haven't seen that in the wild, meaning that, fraudsters are not going through the effort and work to create a fake voice. And it does take a little bit of work, but it's getting easier and easier as the tools get better and better. So we've actually seen one example with one of our banking customers where someone was trying to use a synthetic voice, and we were able to detect it. And what's interesting is if you listen to the voice, it's pretty good. But again, human ears sometimes easily fooled, but the system can detect it. Any other questions?
Not at the moment.
All righty. So let's keep going here. I think we're doing pretty well on time. So let's talk a little bit about performance. Obviously we talked about the ability to find fraud. What kind of impact do these attacks actually have on customers? So we are always looking at customer performance in our system, always looking at how we can get better. And one of the recent evaluations that we did of audio sent to us by one of our customers, we kind of walked through that, that data, looking for, again, similarities in voices. We talked about, oh, by the way, I just want to make sure that the slide did move forward. If it didn't, just ping me and let me know. Looking at the evaluation, we were able to find almost 34% more fraud than they had flagged. So in other words, they had seen some fraud activity, they knew there was fraud, and they gave us the audio from the phone calls for us to analyze, and we were actually able to find even more fraud than they thought was there. The other thing is we were able to help them understand where the fraudsters are attacking. So again, you have thresholds where you look at each transaction, see, okay, this is risky to me. but some fraudsters know that, so they stay under that radar. They're in the $50 to $80 range. So there was a lot of fraud activity happening in that range. So you may have to change how you deal with your business policy, and using the tools that we're giving you, it makes it a little easier for you to deal with more fraud. So not only do we find additional fraud than you were aware of, we can give you tools so that you can quickly go through and evaluate more fraud events. Also, one of the things that we found is based on the number of voices that they had, if when you go live day one with our solution, you can create a very substantial fraudster watch list, and then over time keep adding abusive customers, things like that. So highly effective when you go into production. Same thing with contact centers, right? The flip side of all of this is your agents don't like being traffic cops. So if we can give them a tool that essentially enables them to say no to the bad customers, right? Give them the confidence to say no. I'm sorry, I can't help you. Let me escalate you to a supervisor, so they can go on to the next legitimate caller. That improves their morale, but also, of course, now you're authenticating legitimate callers on a very positive basis. And if you take all of these things, not only the fraud you're stopping, savings in average handle times in your contact center, all of those things could add up to pretty significant savings. In this particular case, we were looking at even just fraud, which obviously would pay for any kind of a project very easily, of course. And using just that number, you get all of the other side benefits that I talked about. And that's the voice channel. The same thing occurs in the chat. We evaluated chat sessions from that particular vendor, same type of thing, right? We found more fraud. We found high volume, low dollar amounts. I remember this particular evaluation because in the chat sessions, same thing, you don't have an easy way to find fraud there. So we created a tool called conversational biometrics. So it's based on our ability to take speech, convert it into text, takes text, convert it into speech. So we developed a very good understanding of language. And so linguistically, there are patterns in your speech, the grammar you use, the word choices, in text do you use emojis, what are the intents of you as you type. So we can read all of that. And so we have a patented technology that can actually look at chat sessions and see if there's similar patterns. So it's not a keyword search, it's above and beyond that. We're actually looking at language that is being used. Our AI engine is actually putting together and saying, okay, these 3 sessions, these 5 sessions are the same individual, even though they're using different account numbers or email addresses or receipt numbers. This is the same person. And when we ran this through this data, we found one young lady, this was obviously her day job, and she stayed at $25. So she was always under the radar that would trigger the retailer. And what she was doing is gift card fraud. So she would call in and say, I'm having a problem with this particular gift card. I can't get it to work. And so they would give her another one. And she did this over 200 times within just a few months. So you can very seriously see that, yes, it's a low dollar amount, but if you do it often enough, there's some good money to be made. So, we can look at the conversational patterns. We can look at the ability, them asking for refunds. We can analyze all of that vocabulary and syntax. And then, again, there's significant dollars around all of that. So I've talked a lot about a lot of different things, and so let me kind of bring it back. So when we started, we were talking about how do we, from a scaling point of view, not only find fraudsters, but how do we shut them down? So again, there's lots of tools out there that can essentially find fraud and give you alerts, but you need a way to be able to actually shut that down. So watch listing is one of those great tools for retailers, because not only can you do the known fraudsters that you have, again, based on biometric clustering and backward search, specifically the clustering tool, you can actually find previously unknown fraudsters that you were not even aware of. So the idea is, let's say someone calls in or they're in the chat session, and you don't have that particular caller's account enrolled in voice biometrics. So Danny Ross is not enrolled in voice biometrics, but when he had called previously, we saw that he was a fraudster. So just that easily, a retailer, even if you have no idea, and this is pretty common, right? Guest checkout, you have no idea whose account this particular receipt belongs to. But now you have a way to shut down those fraudsters, even if you don't have any data on the original customer account that did the purchase. Same thing with abusive customers. No matter how much they change their email addresses, phone numbers, we go ahead and shut them down. And all of this is part of Fraud Nexus is what we call it, where we have in-house fraud professionals monitoring accounts, giving our customers better ways to deal with fraud, giving them new strategies. Hey, we see a new attack vector, kind of giving them those types of tools. So all of that kind of comes together in building a very effective fraud and strategy for all of our customers. And then, of course, the ability to authenticate employees on shared devices was the third thing that we get asked about all of the time. And retailers love the idea of being able to just, again, keep using the devices they have, but apply a faster, easier way to log in. I have one other QSR or restaurant which is thinking about using this from the standpoint, because they already have the benefits on the other side, but thinking about using this not only for employees that are remote, right? So again, they have no control over those devices that are trying to log into back ends, but again, once that employee is part of the system, password resets, and all of those types of annoying and costly types of things, the average is what, $10 for a password reset. You can, essentially just have them take that new device out of the box, the shiny box that they just got, and you can authenticate them on the voice that they used on their old device. I change my device every year, so as an employee, that's a bit of a pain, and so that's what I know from personal experience, that voice goes a long way to make that transition a lot smoother. So those are examples of that. And of course, finally, you can authenticate your legitimate customers from all of your different channels. So I really do appreciate the time today. I wanted to leave at the end opportunities for more questions. I will also add that we're excited to be participating in MRC in Las Vegas. We'll have an actual former fraudster who's going to talk about all of the strategies, and some of them are very surprising that he used as a fraudster. We'll talk about voice fakes, which kind of goes back to the synthetic question that we had earlier. So we definitely look forward to seeing you there. Do we have any last questions here?
You kind of touched on it a little bit, Danny, but just how easy is this to install?
Sure. Generally speaking, I would say 95% of our customers use our cloud-hosted solution. So what that means is essentially it's very light work for your teams. We do all of the heavy lifting. There's some pieces where we need to connect to your telephony systems and things like that. As a matter of fact, even if your systems are on-prem currently, we can easily integrate. We have, as I mentioned, hundreds of customers that use on-prem telephony and contact center solutions. So we're very, very familiar with those. And then we have customers that are moving to cloud-based contact centers. And so that's basically contact cloud to cloud. So again, very easy from an implementation point of view for your teams, and it gets you out of the business of having to deal with that authentication piece on-prem, and we just take it up into the cloud. So very straightforward. Any other questions?
Danny, it looks like that was the last question. Did you have any final thoughts you wanted to share?
I just want to say definitely appreciated the opportunity to talk about this. Our teams are, of course, here. Please, click a link here and follow up with us. We're happy to kind of dive into and share our best practices around the new threats of fraud for retailers. And I had a great time.
Thank you, Danny, for such an informative session. I'd like to thank everyone who attended today's webinar, especially those who submitted